You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and first off, thanks to all of you who sent me well wishes about my trip to Nashville. You guys, it was filled with so many laughs, I just can't count them, and tears as we watched Lainey Wilson perform at the Grand Ole Opry in a Johnny Cash tribute. It was just so good. I truly have the best of friends, and I consider myself so blessed to be able to travel with them nearly yearly. We usually go once a year. So that was just a little update on what I've been doing. All right, let's dive into an update to the case out of Colorado. This has an arrest, but then a drop in charges, and now an arrest again. And I covered this case back in October. It was actually October 8th of 2023. That was following the first arrest of Barry Morphew. Now, he was being charged with the May 2020 death of his wife, Suzanne. Barry's charges were dropped months later, but following some new pieces of evidence, Barry has been rearrested and charged in Cave Creek, Arizona on Friday. So let's just get into it and revisit the details of the case. Now, Suzanne grew up in Alexandria, Indiana, where she met her, first real love and sweetheart, Barry Morphew, at a local golf course. And this was kind of that butterfly-inducing meetup. Barry had been a star baseball player at their shared local high school, and Barry wasn't just high school good. He was next level talented, and he was drafted right into the MLB playing for the Toronto Blue Jays. But his dream of playing in the big leagues was shattered almost as soon as it started when a career-ending injury sent him back to Alexandria. Now, when Barry returned to their hometown, the two met. And they didn't start officially dating until Suzanne graduated high school because, see, Barry is nearly 4 years older than Suzanne. Now, together, the two made plans to attend Purdue University, and it was there at the age of 20 that Suzanne was diagnosed with an aggressive form of lymphoma cancer. Now, the challenge didn't seem to scare Barry all that much. He pretty much stepped up. He started taking care of Suzanne. All of this through the ugly stages of chemotherapy and the difficulties that accompany the battle of cancer. And that's a big move by Barry. They aren't even married. He's only 23, but he literally carried her through the treatment. Well, eventually, Suzanne beat the cancer, and in 1994, the two married. Suzanne went on to teach middle school, and Barry started his own landscaping business. The hopes of having children were somewhat dimmed by the many drugs that Suzanne had ingested, this to fight the cancer. But that didn't stop the religious couple from prayerfully attempting to start a family. The two would go on to both say God blessed them with two beautiful daughters, Mallory and Macy. All right, they're in Indiana, raising a family. And when the two girls grow older and Mallory spreads her wings and enrolls in college in Colorado, Suzanne can't bear the thought of not having their family together. So the couple packs up their younger daughter, Macy, and they move to Colorado as well. The family chose to put down roots in Salida, where they purchased a home nestled in the pines on 7 acres of land. Kind of picture like a home/cabin. There's going to be pine needles scattered on the deck and sounds of birds chirping instead of cars driving by. Squirrels and other animals roam near. So their new life in Colorado, it wasn't that perfect. The marriage was failing, and the tension between the two was ripping the couple apart. On May 6th of 2020, Suzanne sent Barry a text that basically read that she was done with the marriage. It said, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been to for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." Now, this text had been deleted off of Barry's phone, but it was later found by forensic auditors because Barry had taken a screenshot. All right, remember, that's May 6th of 2020. On May 9th, Suzanne shared 59 texts or pics with a man she had begun dating. And yes, her and Barry are not divorced, but Suzanne had confided in her high school friend Jeff via text. And she was romantically involved with him since 2019. They would see each other just on occasion, every couple of months. And it seems that Suzanne was pretty discreet with this relationship. Well, on Sunday, May 10th, it's Mother's Day. Barry allegedly left early that morning for landscaping work in Denver. And that left Suzanne to do her own thing alone because her daughters are away. One is camping in Idaho and another one is at college and just not near the house. So they're away for the day. She's alone. That morning, Suzanne allegedly goes missing. Her daughters try texting her, Happy Mother's Day wishes, and those texts go unanswered. As they become increasingly alarmed, the daughters decide to text a neighbor, just asking that neighbor to check on their mom. When Suzanne wouldn't answer the door, the neighbor called Barry. Barry still isn't home from Denver, so he asked the neighbor to check the garage for Suzanne's mountain bike because his story is that Suzanne was planning on a trail ride that Mother's Day, so Barry says he's thinking maybe she just hasn't returned home yet. The neighbor checks and says the bike isn't in the garage. Now, when they get off the phone, the neighbor is unsettled, so the neighbor phones the police. And maybe Suzanne has had a flat tire while out for a ride, or maybe she's wrecked and is too badly hurt to make it back to the house. They're trying to think positive here. As the police quickly begin searching with what little daylight is remaining, they discover Suzanne's mountain bike down a steep ravine just off the county road. And the bike isn't that damaged. It does have some bent handlebars, but it doesn't look like it's been thoroughly wrecked. Also, it doesn't have signs of blood on it, nor is there any blood in the surrounding area. When Barry finally makes it home that night, he is met by police in his driveway. And shockingly, he's the one peppering them with questions about what they know, if they've seen any mountain lions, and where is Suzanne? Well, I bet investigators are thinking the same thing. Where is Suzanne? And they'd love to know Barry's answer to that question. He tells investigators he left at 5 a.m. with Suzanne still sleeping in the bed. He lets them freely roam the home, where they find her sunglasses and her hydration pack. These are two things Suzanne would always take on a long ride with her. So that doesn't make much sense that those are there. They also find her wallet and her ID, but her phone is missing. As the search continues over the next few days, the reward money offered for information about Suzanne just continues to grow, finally reaching a total of $200,000. 12 days after Suzanne is last seen alive, the FBI and the sheriff's office search one of Barry Morphew's job sites in Salida, Colorado. Tell me you think the husband did it without telling me you think the husband did it. Investigators don't find Suzanne during that search or during multiple other searches throughout the summer. By October, Barry grants an interview with CBS News, and during that interview, he theorizes that Suzanne was abducted. He also shares photos and love letters from their years of marriage. As the snow lands in Colorado and the searches stop happening, Suzanne's family has reached a conclusion. They think Barry knows more than he is sharing. They're operating off the information that Suzanne had shared with them and also a close friend. These are stories about Barry cheating, stories about physical and emotional abuse. But Barry's daughters, Mallory and Macy, they're standing by their father, and they have this whole time. Well, in May of 2021, without Suzanne's body, Barry is arrested on charges of murder, also on tampering with evidence and attempting to influence a public servant. Police said they had collected evidence of Barry's phone doing, some really crazy things on the day of and the day before her being reported missing. The phone seemed to be going on and off airplane mode for multiple stretches, like hours at a time. The phone stopped multiple times at various locations where dumpsters would be. And there was lots of roaming around the outside of the house. And somewhere on the Saturday, so the day before Mother's Day, Suzanne sent a selfie to Jeff. Remember, he's her romantic interest. And that was the last known sighting of Suzanne. And as that day carried forward, so now we're in the middle of the night, so Saturday to Sunday, someone resets Suzanne's Facebook password. And whatever activity was happening that night, Suzanne gained 20 new friends on Facebook. Also, in the middle of the night, Barry is tracked opening and closing doors to his truck. All right, you need to remember, he has a supposedly big day of work ahead in Denver, yet he's up in the middle of the night with his doors opening and closing on his truck. Investigators had discovered that Barry made it to Denver, but he didn't go to the job site. Instead, He spent some time in a hotel. Then he got breakfast at McDonald's. He threw away trash in multiple dumpsters. He went to a store called Work Warehouse. And then finally, he visits the work site where he stays for just 20 minutes. And he doesn't do any work since work at that housing area was prohibited on Sundays. Barry then goes back to the hotel and he stays for 5 hours. All the while, Barry is texting Suzanne, telling her Happy Mother's Day, asking her to call. Investigators said when Monday rolled around, Suzanne was still missing, and she hadn't shown for a cancer treatment. That would mean she's truly not just taking a break. She wouldn't miss a cancer treatment. Well, investigators did search Barry's truck, and no blood was found inside or outside. All of this evidence led to the indictment and Barry spending about 3 months in jail before he was let out on bail. Now, later that year, this is 2021, the case started to go off the rails. First, the judge recused himself from the case over a conflict of interest. Then the trial was moved to a different location and a new judge was assigned. And almost a year after Barry was arrested and charged, the new judge dismissed the case without prejudice, meaning the investigators are still going to work on the case, but Barry is no longer charged. By September of 2023, the Colorado Bureau of Investigations was now working on a different case when they stumbled across some remains located about an hour from the Morphew home. 2 days later, they have positively identified the remains belonged to Suzanne. Now, it had been 3 years and 4 months since she disappeared, and that all gets us to the news that was revealed during Barry's rearrest on Friday. See, a coroner has now determined that no cause of death could be established because Suzanne's body was so badly decomposed. But they could tell that she had died with a very powerful animal tranquilizer in her system. And if you read anything on this case, that tranquilizer is called BAM. The B, the A, and the M all stand for different chemicals that are mixed together that make the tranquilizer. So it's a BAM tranquilizer. And this animal tranquilizer isn't something that people just have lying around, apparently. The investigators are saying that only one person in the entire greater Denver, Colorado area, all of it surrounding the Morphew home, well, only one person had access to this kind of tranquilizer, and that person was Barry Morphew. Investigators said this matches with the tranquilizer needle cap and the tranquilizer gun that had been found at the couple's home during the first initial search. This was shortly after her disappearance. Well, Barry had access to this animal sedative because he used it to hunt deer in Indiana. It was like a side business he did along with his landscaping business. But the tranquilizer evidence wasn't the only thing investigators revealed on Friday. They also said that they can prove that Suzanne didn't die in the area where her body was found. They are saying her decomposition doesn't match someone who would have been ravaged by animals. So they believe she was moved after several months. Now, when Barry was arrested in Arizona on Friday, his bail was set at $3 million. He had been living in Arizona, operating some sort of what he calls a boutique trailer park. I tried to read up on it. Seems there's long-term stays, short-term stays. I don't know what he was doing there. Anyway, that's why he's in Arizona. Now, Barry's attorney, he blasted this indictment, saying that once again, the state has allowed their predetermined conclusion to lead their search for evidence. He said Barry maintains his innocence, and he says the new evidence will not change the case, and it will not change the outcome either. Barry's daughters Mallory and Macy have not commented on the new indictment. I really want to know what you think of this one, because if you're a true crime follower, this case is probably very familiar, and I could have spent at least 15 more minutes talking about specific details. So what I want to know is, do you think the new evidence will be enough to take this case to trial? Now to Groton, Connecticut. This is a city of about 39,000 people, and about a week and a half ago, at 10:32 in the morning, the Groton Police Department were alerted to a robbery in progress at the Chelsea Groton Bank. Police were being told that two men, both wearing surgical masks, had passed a note to one of the bank tellers demanding cash. They claimed to have a weapon, and both were described as white males, one older, one younger. Now, once they received the cash, they had fled the bank in a vehicle that didn't really, at that point, have a clear description. When cops arrived on scene and reviewed both bank footage and other camera footage from the surrounding area, they were able to get a clear description of the getaway car. After 6 hours of searching the surrounding areas, the car was spotted at a Super 8 motel parking lot. Now, working with motel employees, the room was established where the suspects might be holed up. Detectives knocked on the door. The door was never opened voluntarily, but law enforcement and the 2 male suspects began a dialogue. During these exchanges, the male suspects had told officers that each of them was armed and that they also had explosive devices in the room. Upon their refusal to leave the room, additional manpower was called in to aid the detectives. State police and explosive experts arrived on scene, and adjacent businesses were evacuated, and of course all of the motel guests were evacuated as well. The limited communication continued until 11:05 p.m. That's when, unexpectedly, 2 gunshots rang out from inside the hotel room. With the help of a drone, it was determined that both suspects were either dead or incapacitated from the gunshot wounds. The state police tactical unit and bomb squad techs entered the room, and both suspects were transported to the hospital. That's when detectives learned that it was a father-son team. 56-year-old Sean Fallon and 27-year-old Zachary Fallon were identified as the bank robbers. Both men were from Charleston, Rhode Island. Now, that's a small town of about 8,000 people. That is about a 45-minute drive to Groton. Zachary died from his gunshot wound just hours after arriving at Lawrence Memorial Hospital. Sean was hospitalized for several days before succumbing to his gunshot wound. Police have yet to determine if the father shot the son and the son shot the father, simultaneously, or if they each committed suicide. When the room was searched, no explosives were discovered. And that's where the trail ends. I couldn't find social media or Reddit feeds that explain the duo's personal lives, and obituaries have yet to be published. When I cover a case like this, I want to know what led a father to encourage his 27-year-old son to rob a bank with him. I'm going to keep watching this one. I'll let you know if I find out any more details. And let's close out today's episode by touching base on a couple of cases. First, like I promised, let's discuss the Karen Reed not guilty verdict. I knew that was going to come out while I was in Nashville, but there is a positive that it was delayed that we talked about it simply because some things have happened. Now, I would think I don't need to give you a synopsis, but here we go. It's really short and sweet. The victim in the case is Boston Police Officer John O'Keefe. He was found dead in the snow outside of a fellow officer's home in Canton, Massachusetts. This was back in a horrible snowstorm in January of 2022. Now, the woman charged twice with his murder is Karen Reed, his 45-year-old girlfriend. Now, they'd been dating for 2 years, and after a night of bar hopping with fellow law enforcement friends, and I totally use that term loosely, Karen transported John to Brian Albert's house to potentially continue the night of partying. Karen sat outside the home for some time and then left a string of angry voicemails for John. Karen claimed John stayed inside the party at the Alberts and she was left to wait in the car. Karen said she left to return to John's home to care for his niece and nephew. After several hours, Karen, in an attempt to find John, returned to the Alberts where she found John dead on the front corner of the Alberts yard. Karen was charged with second-degree murder. The prosecution felt that Karen had backed over John in a drunk and angry rage before leaving him to die in the snowstorm. Now, the prosecution said they had fragments of a taillight from Karen's Lexus SUV, which was proof she had backed into John. The defense said John had entered the Alberts home and Karen had left angry and betrayed. The defense highlighted that John had large gashes on his arm, which they concluded came from the Alberts German Shepherd. And that whole German Shepherd thing, they said that was evidence that John had entered the home since the dog was never in the front yard. Now, the defense contended that the police work was sloppy and inconsistent, so much so that the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, was fired from his position. Karen's first trial in 2024 ended in a hung jury, and then almost a year later, just last week, at the conclusion of her second trial, Karen was found not guilty of second-degree murder and manslaughter. However, she was convicted of operating a vehicle while under the influence of alcohol. And she had basically admitted to that, by the way. She had said she had had 9 drinks. It's in the documentary. Like all over the place, she had admitted that she was pretty much drunk. Now, she was sentenced to 1 year probation for that operating a vehicle under the influence of alcohol. Okay, there you're caught up. On Friday, we heard from 3 jurors and the lead investigator with their reactions on the second trial. First, let's go to Michael Proctor. And like I said, he was the lead investigator in the lead up to the first trial. And it's important to know that Proctor was investigated separately for his bad behavior during the John O'Keefe investigation. See, during the first trial, Proctor had to admit on the stand that he had sent crude and defamatory texts about Karen to others involved in the investigation. Proctor had called her a, quote, whack job C-word. One of my least favorite words, by the way. He also told peers that she was a babe, but that she had no ass. And he sent a text to his sister where he wrote that he hoped Karen Reed would kill herself. Now, he referenced that he hadn't found any nudes on her phone, and he was disappointed with that, not being able to uncover that. And he called her a nutbag and, another of my not favorite words, retarded. And he expressed hatred for her lawyer. Okay, all of this in the first trial severely damaged Proctor's credibility. In the first trial, some jurors said Proctor was the sole reason that they could not find Karen guilty. Proctor has now told Dateline that the idea that he is corrupt and that he framed Karen is, quote, ridiculous. He also said it was, quote, absolutely not true that he cracked Karen's taillight in an attempt to frame her for John's murder. Now, I searched the internet, and Proctor does not seem to be employed in any official law enforcement position. When he was fired, he lost his pension. All right, so we've got Proctor. So what about the jurors? Paula Prado. She's a lawyer from Brazil. She was known as juror number 11. She told NBC 10 in Boston that after listening to both sides, she had no choice but to acquit Karen of the most serious charges. She said early in the trial she thought Karen might be guilty, but as the trial progressed, she said she realized that there were too many holes that couldn't be filled and that there was nothing that put her at the scene besides the time when she dropped John off. Paula also couldn't reconcile the injuries to John's arm. She said they couldn't have been made by the broken taillight, and so it had to come from something else. And then there was juror number 4. He spoke to TMZ, and he expressed very similar thoughts about the taillight. He said he felt like the video evidence shown in court left him thinking the taillight was still intact in the early morning hours. This would be after she supposedly ran over John. And then there was a third juror, Janet Jimenez. She told WCVB-TV that she changed her mind from guilty to innocent during deliberations. She said she couldn't make sense of the holes in the case, and she was going to rely on the other jurors to talk through the details with her. Obviously, the talking happened, and she decided not guilty. Well, Karen told the press as she left the courtroom last week that no one has fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than she has. And in what I believe is the most surprising move, this is my opinion, Jen McCabe, Brian Albert, and other family members released a joint statement following the not guilty verdict. It read as follows. Today, our hearts are with John and the entire O'Keefe family. They have suffered through so much and deserved better from our justice system. While we may have more to say in the future, today we mourn with John's family and lament the cruel reality that this prosecution was infected by lies and conspiracy theories spread by Karen Reed, her defense team, and some in the media. The result is a devastating miscarriage of justice. Okay, the whole reason that's surprising to me is, do you have any blame in this at all? Because I'm going to leave you with this thought of mine. I wasn't a juror, and I didn't listen to every minute during the 2 trials. I have other jobs besides this. So I have relied on summaries and multiple news articles. So that's my caveat here. But one thing has always bugged me, always. This is from the very beginning, before even the first trial. Multiple responding police cars and an ambulance were flashing their red and blues at 6 a.m. when John's body was found in the snow. Jen McCabe, that's Brian Albert's sister, she was outside. She's the one that sent the misspelled text, remember? Well, she's screaming, and so is Karen Reed. This is loud. And she waits until the scene dies down before she goes and knocks on Brian, her brother's door. And even after she knocks on the door, Brian, whose brothers and sisters in blue are outside, well, Brian never exits his home or talks to anyone, even though a supposed friend and a fellow brother in blue was found dead in his yard. I guess Brian just says, nah, I didn't want to interfere. If there was a body found dead in my yard, I'm just not going to ask questions because I don't want to get in the middle of the police. Hello, you are the police. Now, I'm going to put myself in my own position. I have a really big side yard. There could be a dead body in my side yard, and no one would know that body was there until they went looking for it. If that happened at my house and all of a sudden there was a body in my side yard, do you think I'm going to stay inside of my house and not ask questions? That has always bothered me so much. And that's just one thing. But that needed to be answered for me. And that statement that they left, well, that doesn't make me think you felt like you did anything wrong, Brian Albert. Now, there's obviously more inconsistencies in this case. I don't know what really happened. I wasn't a juror and I wasn't an investigator. But I don't think the prosecution knew either. I don't think they knew what happened. And when we get to that place, you shouldn't send someone away for second-degree murder. I also really ache for John's family. They have definitely experienced sadness in this life, and the verdict was just one more piece of sadness for them. Now, I did some looking, and John's niece and nephew both testified at the retrial, but it was reported that Karen has not spoken to them since the early days of the death. Now, I'm sure we aren't done with documentaries and specials, so those will be coming out. And we also aren't done in the court system. Karen is being sued in civil court by John's family. They are asking for $50,000 in damages for John's death. Now, I'll watch the final ruling on that case, and obviously I'll bring it to you in several months, most likely. Now, I know y'all have opinions. Did she do it, or was she framed? I want you to tell me in the comments. And now to one last update. Travis Decker. Now, when I took the podcast to production, he had still not been found. Travis is the man accused of killing his 3 beautiful young daughters while he had them for visitation in Washington State. Now, the young girls were found asphyxiated in a campground, and Travis is believed to be on the run from law enforcement. Now, in the latest update from News Nation, it was revealed that the girls were found with zip ties around their wrists and plastic bags securely tied around their heads. Now, in audio obtained by News Nation, this audio was from months ago, Travis is heard to be making the case in court that although he didn't have a home, he would still like to see his daughters on visitation. Here, I want you to give it a listen.
Every time I've had the girls, we have been in campsites in national forests and paid campsites that have campers. We've never done anything that was unsafe or anything I wouldn't want to put myself in. I understand that my current position when I'm by myself isn't ideal, but my daughters aren't a part of that. I only get to see them over the weekends, and camping is something that the 4 of us have done since the 3 of them were in diapers. I've never done anything I feel like that puts them in any sort of a risk that most families in the state of Washington, every campsite we've been to in the last month have been almost completely booked out or sold out because everybody's out this time of year.
Now, this court hearing took place in September of 2024, where Travis's ex-wife, Whitney, who's the mother of the 3 beautiful daughters, well, she was pleading with the court to re-evaluate Travis. In court documents, Whitney claimed that Travis had neglected his parental duty towards the children and that he had long-term emotional and physical problems that would get in the way of his ability to parent. Well, ultimately, Travis was granted visitation with his daughters for 3 hours on Fridays and 8 hours every other weekend. And like I said, Travis is still missing and believed by police to be alive. This is at least according to the Chelan County Sheriff's Office. If you have information about Travis, you can call this number, 509-667-6845. CBS News has published photos of what Travis would look like if he shaved his beard and his head. I'll include those in the images on the social media posts and also in the YouTube version of the podcast. Let me know where you think he is and if he's even still alive, because some people believe he's probably committed suicide somewhere. And a quick note about Cowboy Cody. He was in the last episode, the man who let the raccoon loose in the bar. Well, someone asked if they had missed it in the episode, but why wasn't Cowboy Cody charged with animal cruelty? Now, I did say it in the episode, but it was super fast, so let me go over it again. He was charged. His total charges were resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and animal cruelty. But those charges were for the whipping of the mule in the December incident. In the raccoon incident that happened just a few weeks ago, there were no cruelty to animal charges. All right, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. Thank you for being here. I wanted to direct you guys to my daughter Peyton's most recent episode of Into the Dark. While I was in Nashville celebrating with my friends, it just timed out exactly right that Peyton and my other daughter Marley were at my house. So I missed them visiting my home. They were doing some of you know that Peyton danced in college, and she was doing some work with that here where I live. And so they were here. I was in Nashville. But anyways, her Into the Dark episode, the most recent one, was filmed in this studio. So you could cross over and watch Peyton Moreland film Into the Dark in the Rise in Crime studio if you would like. I don't even know. I haven't watched it yet. Maybe she brought my dog down here too. She didn't have Daisy with her. Daisy was back at their home with Garrett because Peyton was just here doing work. So she didn't bring the dog. And maybe she brought Q down here. I don't know. And Q doesn't even know what's going on. Look, she's totally asleep in the episode. All right. Please share this episode with a friend. I love having you guys here. It was almost a full week. Actually, it was a full week where I went without recording anything because I was on my vacation. I missed you guys. I really, really enjoy doing this. I love this shared experience. I have received a couple of case suggestions. I'll be researching them for you. We love 5-star reviews and positive comments here at Oh No Media. That's for Rise in Crime, Murder with My Husband, and Into the Dark. And thanks for joining me. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.